Hi, Luigi. Just getting you on this topic of the synthetic data. Will synthetic data be used for AI stuff? Kind of AI, whatever, and machine learning or whatever. I'm going to give my perspective on this, and I looked at the article really quickly that you pointed to. And I'll give my kind of experience in having kind of done some things, and not even in the language industry. I'm going to talk outside of the language industry first. Um, what I worked in telecom industry, telecom data. Okay, that's big data. Okay, all the stuff we're doing here in the language tree is not big data. I'm talking big, 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 big. Okay, so I spent 5 years at Mycom doing performance management, enterprise performance management systems for telecom operators. That's big data. Okay, I'm saying that's the stuff that runs at your telephone. So all the data that runs to your SMS messages, your calls, the call drop stuff, all your SM, all the routing, all the data for entire countries. Okay, the handshakes between the signals, between the antennas and the servers and stuff, between the servers driving the data to the antennas, the antennas doing the tracking your phone. Okay, knowing if you can actually contact your phone while you're in a forest. Okay, that's big data. Okay, I worked on that for 5 years. So back in 2001 to 2006. So that was early. Okay, yeah, we were talking about AI over in language industry back then, but we weren't talking about AI. Now MyCom, where I work at, is talking about AI. Now it's talking about AI, applying AI. But we were doing big data, really big data. Um, and so one of the things that we struggled with, and that's the telecom industry is really interesting because you can actually test things. There are ways to test it a lot easier than language. Language is a really tough thing to test, right? Um, but what we're doing is when we're trying to estimate, we're trying to do testing of this enterprise software, all the different kind of things. And I was running the test teams. Yeah, I did the software test manager, one of the test teams for a while too. And and one of the problems that we struggled with, in we were trying to actually we were working on 3G before 3G was out, right? So back then it was 2G GSM and then 2.5G, which is GPRS, and then we were contracted to work for 3G systems. So basically, what we call edge today. I'm not going to go all the differences of these things because there are kind of different still. We're working on GSM-R for the railways as well, and and then we were working on, this was all before 4G, okay, and 5G, way before. And so the thing is, when you're going from, I don't want to, I actually did a conference talk I did a conference talk at Bonn, Localization World Bonn in 2004 on, I actually explained all this stuff, right? So go. I showed all the different types of, the three or four different generations of the systems. And so, for telecom systems and how that compared to customer support in the language industry. Um, and the thing that the thing that we were doing when we were trying to test, how do you test, how do you know if this system, the software that's going to actually all the different all my telephone operators, okay, that we were working for, there's not like millions, okay, they're small batches. These are like they're already big companies, right? You only have a few, like, if we want to talk monopolies of countries, telecom is that way. Okay, they all kind of actually they all mergers and acquisitions stuff. It's just you're gonna there are not millions of these things. There are not even thousands. There are not even hundreds. Okay, it's just that you got a few operators per country, right? Especially the smaller countries. There's like one, right? And some of the bigger countries are going to have maybe a few, but not too many, right? You may have regional kind of specific ones, but they're all kind of competing. But this is not. This is really big data, and they have to be able to optimize everything for all the wireless stuff. I'm not talking about the landline here. Landline's even easier. The wireless stuff is way complicated. You have to decide where you position your antennas and stuff. I'm not going to go into a whole course on how to explain this stuff. I actually certified trainer in giving user courses and installation courses on these systems, right? Um, um, so the thing is that the amount of data that's run through these systems and to track your phones of all the people of all the possible phones and knowing if it's going to catch and if it's going to and you want to prevent a call drop during in the forest or a distance area away from the antenna, right? And there's the kind of the distance you have to between two different antennas where it transfers from one antenna to the other. See, this is the way it gets kind of complicated, right? So when you're driving along your car or you're taking a train and stuff, and then which antenna is actually outside of the train, right, or outside of your car? These are antennas that are tracking your phone, and then it's transferring from one to the other, right? So it's got to track your whole phone and keep track of it, and keep the call going, right, or keep the SMS actually flowing through the system, right? So that's big data. And so we had to simulate this stuff, right? We had to spread to simulate. And you can make little test files and test and we had to test actually with the data be able to kind of we were doing an aggregated data. I mean, we're talking about, we actually worked on online analytical processing with data warehousing here. We had a patented, I was working on the patented database. I think it's this thing. I actually recovered the patent back on that one. Had a whole patent on just the database approach to it, and we had to aggregate the data to be able to test it and stuff. So sorry about the ding ding ding. Got something coming in. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to work it out right now, so I'm not going to worry. It's LinkedIn the message. I'm not going to turn it off. I'm not going to do it right now. I'll just say that to be able to test the data, or do you have to test the software to be able to be tracking? Can it handle all the data and all the times? Because you got to do it you got to do refresh when you're doing this kind of stuff. You want to do refresh rates of the data on a whole network, a whole phone network for the entire country. Okay, do you see the kind of thing I'm talking about here for the phone network, the mobile phones, of all the calls that are happening in parallel, right? To simulate how many users are on the call network at the same time and on the SMS network at the same time, right? So like how do you simulate, okay? How do you simulate the amount of SMS messages that are sent on New Year's Eve? This was our critical kind of thing. New Year's Eve, okay, in one time zone. Let's talk about one time zone for Central Europe, CET time zone. How do you simulate for all of the different countries that are in the CET, Central European time zone, for all the SMS messages that are sent out at between 11:55 and midnight, 00:05, during that period of time, that 10 minutes, right, of the entire time zone of all the countries in Europe, okay? See kind of stuff I'm talking about? That's big data, right? So, and when you were doing testing, the developers, the testers, they were kind of like, well, they want to test it like a just thing. And I said, no, you're going to have to test. We're going to have to test this. They want to test little sample data. And we're talking about sample data too, because we were actually working with 3G. So it's all called 3GPP, okay? 3GPP is a network consortium of the different formats of the telecom industry, right? And so we're actually working specifications that are different from the samples. And what you want to get is a specification and a sample to be able to actually, then you want to be able to take the sample and you want to replicate the sample to make it so you can actually test it, right? And so a lot of the testers I would deal with, they would want to do little samples of tests, and they're kind of like, a file here, a file there, and an hour and stuff. No, you need to simulate the entire country. And that was the real test. And I told all my test team, I said, you need to create data sets that are going to simulate as if you have millions of concurrent users that are all sending those SMS messages at the same time in a 10-minute span, okay? That's data simulation, okay? So this is the kind of stuff that is getting into what you call synthetic data. Because you got to create it, right? Because I didn't have the data. We didn't have the data. We had to simulate it. So that was, we in the telecom industry had to do this, right? And I told my testers, I said, you need to figure out ways to create simulated data. Call it synthetic data, call it you want what, but you need to do it so that it simulates that moment, because we can bring down a whole network if we don't have this thing running right, and we don't have it tested. We need to make it so that this is tested at that kind of level, because yeah, the number of customers we got, these are like, they're not very many customers, right? So yeah, so synthetic data is really important, whatever you want to call it. Simulated data, synthetic data, I call it simulated back then, or whatever. This is buzzwords. Um, Now, bring it back into the language industry. Well, not just language, but I'll take it in the language industry. So how do you simulate like all of the possible translations that are running through Google Translate at any moment in time? Because you know how many the things are running through Google Translate at a moment? That's a lot. Okay, really big. How do you test it so that you can actually do it, so that you don't bring the system down, right? Um, on top of kind of cloud-based structures, right? Now, Facebook. Look at Facebook. We've been talking about Facebook for like since I got a Facebook account in like 2010, 2009 maybe. And back then I was talking with my brother-in-law who also works in the software industry. We were talking about the customized warehousing, data warehousing that Facebook had been creating themselves, because they wanted to be able to handle this kind of stuff, right? So this is really big. Um, they had to be able to handle all the video and the images and all that stuff that people are uploading. Okay, we're talking huge, huge. And how does Facebook? How does Facebook? How are they able to simulate the testing of how many users they're doing? They're going to be uploading all those images and all those messages and all those videos to their platform at one moment in time for a period of whatever period of time in a day on a specific regional server in a cloud-based environment. Okay, um, and this is back 12ish years ago. So we were talking about that back then, um, and I was down and I was actually telling him what we had done at MyCom and stuff and how we're doing it. And I mean, this kind of stuff this is big data. And I mean, here, I work at SAP too, right? So business objects, hey, business data, business enterprise data. I mean, business intelligence. You got to handle a lot of data, right? Got to handle a lot of data. And I'm not going to sit there and explain how we do all these things, right? Because I'm not supposed to. I'm not here to kind of reveal how we do things, right? But I want to say is this kind of stuff, and and I've worked on the business intelligence. I've worked out in SAP. I've worked on the the financial enterprise applications, financial data, right? So pretty critical stuff. I've worked on business intelligence stuff, predictive analytics, business intelligence, um, software enterprise, performance management systems here at SAP too, and then SAP data, right? So all the R3 stuff, right? Um, so here you gotta simulate stuff, right? I mean, you gotta be able to you gotta make it so that you're able to try to kind of do as if all the users were all connected in parallel, right? Um, I mean, the stuff I'm working on right now, I mean, the stuff I've been working on the past couple of years is nothing. Okay, because I work for the teams I've been working on for the past several years are pretty much all the technical writers, um, their infrastructure, which is only basically what I think we say we have 1,000 users. We say this in conferences, right? So about 1,000 users. That's nothing. That's nothing. Um, Add all the translators to it. What the whole language experience things when they talk about the number of vendors we have. It's up on the website, like 70th vendors up on the translation.sap.com. About 70th vendors. You add the whole pool of all the translators. I think it's kind of mentioned some say like 3,000 translators. That's nothing. Okay, 3,000 translators, 1,000 internal documentation writers plus video people. That's a small bucket of people, right? So, and they're all it's nothing compared to telecom, right? Um, or compared to business intelligence and massive. So the other products I've worked on, both at SAP and before at SAP and telecom and stuff, are like really, really big data compared to the language industry stuff that I've been working on just the past few years. And in the language industry, we're doing now, yeah. And so, like I said, Google and Like think of all the stuff in Google and Microsoft and how many things they're doing, or how much processing doing on the Microsoft Translator app, right? And so, and how many people are using that in parallel. But Google's a lot more, right? So, and how do you keep that system under control? And how can you test how many things are happening? Now, and that's kind of easy stuff because then you're talking about just, well, that's just sentences, right? Well, voice too, because the Microsoft Translator's got voice too. Um, they're not doing too much image translation, right? So, well, they're kind of getting to that, but it's you got to do that too. But this or image translation are basically text on images, right? So, um, but the whole AI thing that we're getting into is now to how do you deal with how can we how can we take I'll take another couple of examples. How can we take like people like me, okay, right? People like me. How can you simulate the data for facial recognition with us, right? Right. So how can can we simulate that stuff and put masks on everybody, right? Or can we take data that we have the mask and take it off, right? Take the mask off, right? As if they didn't have a mask. That's the kind of stuff that we get into here. Um, or how can you simulate, whatever kind of data? With I got the Pittsburgh Pirates thing here. How could we remove that kind of stuff and hide it, right? So, um, or how can we simulate data with facial recognition without the beard, right? With the beard, add a beard, take off the beard, right? So, and there's lots of software that kind of make you look older and all that kind of stuff. So, um, but this is always a lot of these things happen. We kind of show this kind of a joke. You can do this for one person. What if you're doing this in parallel for just an entire country, right? Think how many, what if like the you know, the 1.5 billion people in China were all doing things at one time, right? These are the kinds of things you want to be able to simulate um, in certain applications for certain purposes. And I think that's the big challenge right here. Um, and that's the kind of stuff I like working on because I've kind of done it before, and that's the kind of fun thing of having worked outside of the translation the language industry. I've kind of worked on other stuff too, so I've seen how we had to do it in other ways, and had to not just seen it, had to actually explain how we're going to kind of do it to my colleagues. So I thought we're going to have to do with it, and in certain ways on aggregated data in contexts that are just kind of way beyond what you know. How do you do this? Like like I'm an auditor of ISO 9000 auditor of a lot of different processes and production of processes. So how are you going to do this? If you're going to be how are you going to be able to testing? Because can you want to go in and do an auditing of a test team? How do you want to see if they're actually checking that they can actually end it with the quality, and are they actually testing the quality at what size, and are they out how they handling the concurrent users, or simultaneous and concurrent users and all that stuff, or they're not? Then you go ask for, well, how do you do your data, right? And do that. This is what I do. If I come in as an auditor, this is exactly the kinds of things I'd be asking, because I know that don't if you don't use synthetic or simulated data, because you can't gather this data for customers, a lot of stuff, right? You can't do it in most contexts. This got remote connection. Who's got remote connection to data of the actual users? In a build system, we don't have this kind of stuff. You don't have this, right? Um, there are a few exceptions to this. Yes, I know there's few exceptions. Some of us know these few exceptions, right? But all the kind of stuff that's why whenever you have a customer support team, I've run customer support teams, right? And the first thing you do for this is all previous to this SAP. Whenever you have a customer support situation, you say, well, can you give us your data they're having problems with, and then you can tell us the build you're on, and then we'll try to reproduce it, right? Because we can't actually test what the user is because we're not in their system. So this is why it's really the data thing is a really big thing to deal with, and this is why you want to be able to. If I was auditing things, I would be saying how you simulating the data to be able to make it so that you can put it as if you're in a customer situation and doing it, and like larger than what your test streams are thinking about it. They're like unit level testing. How you doing this at a higher level? So yeah, that's my thought on it, and that's just a little chunk of what I want to say. But I want to sit there and talk for like 20 minutes because no one's going to listen that long. But that's the kind of the situation. How do you deal with synthetic simulated data? Is It's going to be an important thing. It is an important thing already in other industries. They have to deal with this all the time already. So, um, like traffic logistics, think about it. Like the traffic when you're doing traffic signage, and they're going to be able to figure like major metropolitan areas with all the traffic lights and stuff. That's you're getting that kind of data. That's the kind of thing where you start getting things. What do you do if all like what happens if all the signs everything goes down? You know, electricity turns off for like a minute. How do you deal with the emergency situation? Or how many then you got to restart them up again? Or you want to totally restart? You know, these are and how do you handle all the different signals between all the different cars all passing by and they're trying to do all the processing of all the possible the green lights going through all the signals throughout the entire city and what's your spacing of the time between you get to one green light and making it your traffic flow is happening. This is like big data, right? So that's where it gets kind of fun. And how do you create data that actually can trace that to say what if the cars were all kind of how do you do it if all the cars are flowing? What happens if there's an accident and everybody's kind of doing the onlookers thing and they're all stopping and slowing down the traffic and stuff? How do you simulate this kind of stuff? This is kind of cool, kind of fun to do with. So yeah, synthetic and simulated data is going to be it's always been a challenge, will continue to be a challenge, and for each industry that goes into this, it's always a challenge. And I like those, those challenges are kind of always fun. So, Jeff, that's my opinion on it. Jeff, sign out.